Hi, I'm Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Thank you very much. We have a special studio audience today, and that is from a very Yeshiva seminary in Yerushalayim, which I'm not going to mention because I don't want to get the girls into trouble because, people, the Rabbi Orlofsky Show can be controversial. But we're welcoming everybody here from around the world and all the ships at sea. And whether you're listening on Torah Anytime or wherever you listen or watch your podcast, we're happy to have you along. And we have a sponsor for this episode, and you're going to see how everything ties together because the sponsor for this episode is also the reason for the episode, and also it ties in with the audience. And what can I tell you? Just everything fits together so beautifully on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. So I'm reading the dedication. It is sponsored by Esti. I'm a Beis Yaakov senior who is a big fan of your shiurim and especially your podcast. Thank you. I look forward to it every week. Me too. And sometimes I listen to them again. Me too. I have to tell you, that's one of the great things. When I used to have tapes, there used to be these like cassette tapes that you could buy with shiurim. And people say, I love to buy yours because a regular Torah tape, all they have is the Torah, but yours, so entertaining, I could listen to it several times. That's true. Anyway, I would like to sponsor this podcast as Eloi Nishmas Devosha Rachel Bas Rav Aaron Overshol. I would also like to ask you to address a particular question my friends and I have. However, keep my name anonymous. Okay, Esti, you are anonymous. In my school, the seniors are busy figuring out what seminary they want to apply to. And I was wondering if you could address this topic since some of my friends and I are a little stressed. We want to know, how does a girl choose a seminary based on what considerations? I consider myself yeshivish, in quotes. In terms of hashkafas, I know you addressed this a little bit in this past week's episode. That's where I was talking about the pink shirts and the black hats. And I got a lot of reaction from a lot of people. A lot of interesting reactions, but that's maybe a follow-up. However, I come from a family that does use technology. We got to talk about this too. We got so much to talk about. And I am a little worried that yeshivish seminaries will be saying that technology is harmful and evil and one should never use it. It's probably true. I know that in reality, at least in my life in particular, this is not realistic to explain. I'm careful about technology and I'm holding off to get a smartphone until I'm older and married. But I don't feel that everything is completely usser, as some people hold as a practical way for me. We're going to have to talk about this. There's a lot to talk about, but you understand, if you say that all technology is usser, so then you're going to have to get out the old washboard and bring your clothes down to the river. Clean them because washing machine is part of technology, especially now when everything is like controlled. I met a fellow who has a pacemaker, and when he has to adjust it, he holds his phone up to his chest, and the doctor is able to, calibrate it through the technology. So, it gets a little tricky. But okay, like I say, it's a whole other discussion. Technology use is just one example. Kolel forever versus just for the first few years of marriage is another example. I know that I will want a serious guy to marry who values learning, and I know I'd like us to start out in Kolel for at least the first few years, but I'm not sure Kolel forever, parentheses, or Kolel and Chinuch is for me. I wouldn't want to end up in a seminary where if you are not planning to stay in Kolel forever, you are a second-class citizen. I would really appreciate it if you could address this on your podcast, and the sooner the better, as this is something my friends and I have to decide the next couple of weeks. Well, Esti, as it happens, you rubbed on a sore spot. Because you know that on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, sometimes we just say straight divrei Torah, sometimes we discuss societal issues, and sometimes I just rant and rave. If you remember all the way at the beginning of the podcast, and I just got to 2 emails from people who said they've been watching from the first one when we were trying to decide for the name of the podcast. Somebody had suggested Dave's Raves or Dave's Rants, which basically is the same idea. Evidently, they felt that I rave and rant, or rant and rave. I don't think Ad Kedei Kach, but yeah, I do have certain issues that I think are important. And this issue of seminary is something that is so incredibly important. Now, let's start. So we got to get right into this. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to take more than one podcast. Because there's so many issues that need to be addressed and so many things that need to be discussed. And if you know me already, you know that you can't just accept everything the way it is. He's not with us anymore, so I feel like I can say this, but I don't know if he wanted this publicized, certainly when he was alive. But I was by Rabbi Moshe Shapiro once on Sukkot, and my son was talking about some of the problems in yeshivas, and he said, Olam ha-yeshivas ze mamish ason. Ason is a Hebrew word for like disaster. It's a disaster. Va'ani lo choshev sheyachol letaken. I don't know if you can fix it. Ani choshev shetzarich lefarek v'libnot mechadash. I think you have to really rebuild it from the ground up. Nobody wants to address this. Somebody asked me recently, why is the only thing that we're learning in yeshiva is Gemara? I said, because yeshivas were not meant to be for every single person. It was an area of specialty. People went to cheder. People learned how to read. People learned chumash. People learned halacha and hashkafa from the home. Today, we expect the schools to be the home. And parents will say this straight out, that I expect the school to be able to provide my kid with a hashkafa and with a direction. But if you're going to do that, you have to completely rethink the structure of the yeshiva. What's it trying to accomplish? What's your goal? And if you don't have your self-ma'asev machshav techila, if you want to accomplish something, you have to first define what it is I'm trying to accomplish. I told this story, I'm sure, in the past. Problem is, Esty listens more than once, so I guess she's heard this story. But I was at a Shabbaton. I was one of the faculty members. And it was just before Shalosh Shudas, and the organizer says to me, wow, the Shabbaton is a big success. And I said, why? And he says, well, we have a lot of students and they're all having a great time. So I said, is the purpose of the Shabbaton to bring in a lot of students and give them a good time? And he paused and he looked at me and said, well, what it's supposed to be the focus? And I said, Shalosh Shudas is the wrong time to ask that question. When you're first planning the Shabbaton, that's what you're supposed to do. Go back to the start and decide, what is the purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? Because if you don't know where you're going, the odds of you arriving there are very slight. And that's why I've said this many times. Most people live the life that happens instead of the life they want. People end up someplace. Is this what I really wanted? I don't know. I don't really think about it. I ended up somewhere. I ended up doing something. But I don't know what I really want, because most people don't sit down and really plan out at the end, who do I want to be at the end of my life? Or the way I put it was, most people do what most people do because that's what most people do. Yeah, that's a fact. We know this. Sometimes I'll have girls who believe in a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They believe in Torah. They believe in sneeze. But they're dressed in a way that's not appropriate. And I ask them why. And they say, because everybody dresses that way. So it's such an important issue for a person to be able to look at something and say, okay, what's the ideal? So, why do girls go to seminary in Eretz? Because girls go to seminary in Eretz. Why do girls go to seminary in Eretz? Now, let me be magda this so you understand what I'm talking about. I learned in Eretz the first time, 1975. There were not many options. If you were of a more modern background, So there was Machon Gold. That was for girls. It was much more Zionistic. It was more modern Orthodox. It was that was the approach. BMT was the boys' school that both of them were run by the Jewish agency. They were, that was for one particular clientele. There was a small percentage of American Bachrim who would go to Chveis, the Mir, Kol Torah, Panovich, but that was a very small percentage of people. There were a few yeshivas that were designed for guys learning in Israel. Itri, a lot of Americans went there. Eventually, a group broke off to make Mishkan Torah, and that was called Splitry. And that was one approach. Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim had been around for many years. Merkaz HaTorah had been around. But those are the options. For girls, there was BJJ, and there was Mechala, and I think that was it when I was around. That was your options. And a girl wanted to come to Eretz. Those were essentially the choices that you had. Because it was not mekubal to come and learn in Eretz. Why would someone come and learn in Eretz? There was only one reason. Because Eretz spoke to you. You wanted to be in Eretz. And it was very hard. If you ate badats, there was, I think, one falafel place that you could go to. They didn't have a wide variety. I can't say that the food was of a high caliber. Certainly the hygiene wasn't, but that was about it. Those were your options. If you ate Rabbanut, there was a place called Richie's Pizza in town. This was the hangout on King George. Only people who were living on the edge would go over there, And that was basically it. So there was no going out to eat. There was no diet soda. There was Temple Cola, which was so bad that the only reason Israelis made it was to show you that we just don't care. That's why. That's how bad Temple Cola was. There was Coke. Pepsi was boycotting us because of the Arab boycott. And so there was only Coca-Cola. And it came in big, giant, heavy glass bottles that you carried back from the Makolet. And you would have to return them. They would deposit bottles. These things were heavy. And you could buy gas cartridges for your seltzer maker. And if you wanted to, you could buy Petal, which is a concentrated flavor that you would put into the cup and add to be able to make your own sort of cheap soda. Petal means raspberry because the first type that came out was raspberry, and so it didn't matter. You could have orange petal, you could have cherry petal. It was all the same. It was called petal because it was raspberry. That's how modern Hebrew works. Yeah, I think I mentioned this once. Most people don't know this. In Hebrew, if you want to say a back axle, it's called a bek axle. If you want to say a front axle, I know you're thinking front axle. Of course not. It's back axle kidmi. A front back axle, yeah? So, and this, nobody believed me. They went and they actually checked it out. An attaché case is called Teak James Bond. Because they never saw an attaché case. Only in the movie James Bond, they saw he carried an attaché case. So it became known as Teak James Bond, a James Bond bag. And people actually say these things. But, so everything was petal. And that was it. You could also buy like orange drink or grapefruit drink that also came in reusable bottles. And that was it. Napkins? To the life of me, I can't figure out why. Napkins were made out of wax paper. Well, I used to come here. I don't know why. Because you just keep wiping your hands and it doesn't do anything because it's wax paper. I asked this once to an Israeli. He said, well, that way you can use it again. I said, yeah, but that's not really the purpose of a napkin. To be a little indelicate, people used to bring toilet paper from America because the only one they had here was like this blue, rough paper with little pieces of wood still in it, and it was tough. Yeah. So you lived very simply. The only reason to come to Eretz Yisrael was because you really wanted to be in Eretz Yisrael, and it was an immersive environment. You couldn't make phone calls. A phone call was $5 a minute. If you wanted to make a phone call, you went down to the main post office on Yafo, and you'd pay them a certain amount of money. Because the phones back then used to use tokens. They were called asimonim. And, if you want to try to call America, you just keep dropping in asimonim. It takes you forever, so you have to go and pay at the post office in order to be able to use it. I got 3 phone calls during my year in Israel. I got a phone call from my parents on my birthday. They sang happy birthday to me. It was a very beautiful moment. I called them when I got hepatitis. And they called me when I got better to say, come home. So you only came to Eretz Yisrael because you really wanted to be in Eretz Yisrael. Now I'll tell you, to me, I came to Eretz Yisrael the first time January 1969. I was a kid, a year and a half after the 6-Day War. And it spoke to me in a way I can't tell you. I came back for camp to stay Chamed for 2 years. And that was just tremendous. When I came to learn in 1975, Bein Hastarim, when I had free time, I used to go down to the old city. They were excavating it. I remember when they discovered the Cardo Maximus. Now it's a big road. You can see it. I remember when they dug up and they found the pillars. I saw as they were rebuilding the arches. I used to just walk through the streets of Yerushalayim. It spoke to me. I felt more at home in Yerushalayim than I ever did growing up in Long Island. It was, in fact, I have people who ask me today whether or not they should move to Eretz Yisrael. And I point out, it's very hard. It's very hard for a lot of reasons. Yeah, you leave your family behind, and some people think that's a plus, but you'd be surprised, when you want to make a birthday party. Just something small. You think the family's going to come together. You don't have any family. You don't have any connections. I grew up in America. My grandfather came from Vengrove, outside of Warsaw. And he was a Greener. Never learned English his whole life. My father had to make it on his own. He built his own business, moved out to the suburbs, built up a family. I was born an entitled American. I spoke English. I knew my way around. I was a citizen. I moved to Eretz Yisrael. I became my grandfather. And since everything here works with protexia is a very nice word. In English, it means corruption. Because if you're related to somebody, then suddenly you get special treatment. That's called corruption. That's against the law in America. So you don't have any protexia. And you're the, a Svardi once complained to me. They said, in the high schools here, they have quotas. They only take a certain amount of Svardim. I said, don't complain to me. I'm an American. They don't have any quotas for us. They can just tell us no, and nobody will speak up for us. You had a tremendous disadvantage. You don't really know the language. You don't know the culture. It's very difficult. And I tell them, kids come here and they get into trouble. And if your kid is successful, why do you want to bring them there and ruin their life? And I go through a lot of the problems. And then they say to me, but you live here. I said, I have to. Going to one of my favorite references, which is, of course, superheroes. So, Batman has a villain called Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze can only exist in a sub-zero temperature. He wears a special suit. Yeah. And when he's in his house, so the whole thing has to be like a gigantic freezer. Ask Mr. Freeze if he likes being there. It doesn't make a difference. He has to be there, otherwise he's going to die. I have to live in Eretz. I can't breathe in Chutz La'aretz. I just can't. When I come back here, I sigh. I take a breath, I'm able to I'm able to live again. That's me. Some people it speaks to and some people it doesn't. I told this story. Someone came to visit us and they said, you live in Eretz Yisrael? Aren't the apartments small? And I say, yes, the apartments are small. I lived in Far Rockaway in a 2-family house. I had a basement, I had a deck, I had a backyard. Absolutely, the apartments are small. And it's so hot here. Yes, we are in the Middle East. It's essentially a desert. Yes, it is very hot. And it's so dusty. Why is it so dusty? I said, well, the land was deserted for 2,000 years, and the girl only comes in twice a week, and she hasn't gotten to everything, so, it's still a little dusty. And then she said, then why do you live here? That's the question. It's hard to live in Eretz. Why do you live here? So you live here only because there's something that speaks to you. And those were the only people who came to learn in Eretz. Whether they were going to yeshiva or to a seminary, it's because you wanted to be in Eretz. So, my kids all know it, and I have been approached over the years to start my own seminary. I guess people figure I have 8 daughters, I have a built-in clientele. I was going to call it Orlofsky. But anyway, so I'll make my own seminary. I said, I'd be happy to make a seminary, but nobody will come. So what do you mean? I said, because I want to recreate the Eretz Yisrael experience that we had. So I would move it outside of Yerushalayim, on a campus, with facilities, and there'd be no cell phones, not kosher, not treif, not anything, because if you're on the phone to mommy 3 times a day, ironic, the same week that the Gedolim came out against non-kosher cell phones, Psychology Today had on their cover how cell phones are destroying college students in America. The same week. And they weren't talking about kosher, not kosher. They say cell phones. And they said it used to be a kid went off to university and he was able to grow up. Now they can't. They're on the phone with their mommy 3 times a day. They can't grow up. People can't plan. It's an amazing thing. I'm old. Okay, if we haven't established that yet. I'm not mature, but I am old. So sometimes I ask people, how do you get there? They said, don't you have Waze? I said, no, I don't have a phone with Waze. I said, don't you have a GPS? I said, no, I don't have a GPS. Because, well, how are you going to get there? I said, well, I have a paper and a pencil. And if you give me directions, I can write them down and follow them. Because in my generation, that's what we did. We didn't have a satellite directing us. You had to know, go down to this traffic light, make a left, and go down here, And now it makes you so dependent. I'm talking about these were psychologists writing about college students in America, not from a religious point of view. I said, so I would put up a cell phone blocker. I would have pay phones if you want to call and, have your parents call you, etc. But Rabbi Sharfman, who does not have a Beis Yaakov seminary, he told me 10 years ago, I would like to answer cell phones. Not kosher, non-kosher. I'd like to answer cell phones. He says, it used to be I gave a class. At the end of the class, the girls were arguing about what I said. They were talking about it as they were walking to the next class. And now I give a class. At the end of the class, every girl pulls out their phone and talks to somebody. So I said, so how can I give you an Eretz Yisrael experience? When you're in Yerushalayim, girls go out to eat. Not all girls, not all the time, but many girls, and a lot of times. Even if it's just for a slice of pizza, even if it's just, for chveisa falafel, or for whatever it is. I told you, when I was here, you couldn't go out. There's no place to go. You were stuck eating yeshiva food. That made you an adult. The oil content. By 3 months in yeshiva, you could have stuck a wick in your hair and recreated the Hanukkah miracle. You would have burned for 8 days. But, so how can I recreate that Eretz Yisrael experience? Now, this is always the question. Can we turn back the clock? Can we make things go back to the way they were? Right? You can't. You can't. So the reason most people come to Eretz Yisrael to learn, either in yeshiva or seminary, is because it is considered de rigueur today. Everyone goes. Everyone goes to Israel and everybody learns in seminary. The amount of seminaries in Eretz Yisrael for a girl to choose from is mind-boggling. I think it'll be easier to find a shidduch than it will to be able to figure out which seminary to go to. Now, how does a person choose a seminary? That is so easy. I have guys from many different yeshivas in Eretz who come to my house, and I've had over the years girls from many different seminaries who come to my house. And when I ask them that question, how did you choose this yeshiva or seminary? The number one answer is, that's where my friends were going. Because that's how we make decisions. We make decisions based on what our friends are going to do. And so if my friends are going here, then I'll go too. So I've spoken with girls who are in different seminaries, and I said, be magdir for me. Explain to me the difference between this one and that one and this one and that one. After a while, it's hard. It's very hard to define the difference between this seminary and that seminary. I'm not using any names right now. But so usually you can put the seminaries into certain categories, right? So there are those that will be super yeshivish, and then there will be those that are super yeshivish and intellectual, and then those that are super yeshivish and not intellectual. Then you're going to have those that are regular yeshivish, and intellectual, and then regular yeshivish and not intellectual. Then you have the ones that are balabatish, and then balabatish intellectual. Then you have the ones that are over this, they're just wild, really wild Beis Yaakos. I don't even want to go into that because it's so frightening. But and then you have the ones that are on the edge, skirting the edge of the Beis Yaakov world, and then you have the ones that are, basically not part of the Beis Yaakov world. And there's so many, so you try to classify them, and then you say, what's the difference between this one and that one and this one and that one? And when I was the Long Island director of NCSY, heads of seminaries and heads of yeshivas who would come to see if I had any NCSY kids who might be matim. And I would ask them, what's the difference between your yeshiva and this yeshiva and that yeshiva? And I would try to compare them. And you could see it was kind of hard for them to really be magdir. How is this one different than that? Or how is that one different than this? I'll never forget, it's not around anymore, but there was a yeshiva called Ner Yaakov, Rabbi Shuli Liff, who is a master mechanech. And he opened up his yeshiva, and he was recruiting. And I said, why is your yeshiva different than this one or that one? And he said, me. Because I have something unique to offer. Okay. Does any girl choose a seminary based on who is the menahel or menahelet of the seminary? Someone would say, I really want to learn by Rebbitzin so-and-so. She does that Beis Yaakov frown better than most people. She has the really severe short sheitel, and she has the sweater over her shoulders, and she knows just how to make that sour look. Now, I'm exaggerating. Of course I'm exaggerating. I have 8 girls. They all went through the Israeli system. But my wife used to say, I understand why in a high school you have to have everybody frowning. Because you never know what these girls are going to do. You never know. One of my daughters had skinny wrists, and her uniform shirt was hanging a little bit open. And so the people who were checking the girls as they walked in, they said, you have to move the button. So when she comes in the next day, they're waiting for her. They look and they go, oh, you moved the button? And she said, yeah, you told me to. And they were disappointed. They got a chappa. So my wife said, so pay one person to smile. Smile to girls. You're the designated smiler, You don't want to create an atmosphere that's oppressive, right? A friend of mine was a menahel in a famous girls' high school in America. I don't want to mention the name of the place. He had a very difficult time with the staff, and eventually the staff complained so much to the board that they got rid of him. But he told me that at one point, at the teachers' meetings, the teacher said, you know what your problem is? You want the girls to be happy. And he says, Bidiyuk, That's it. You figured it out. I want the girls to be happy. I want girls to wake up in the morning and come to school happy. Be happy to be there. A friend of mine, I won't mention who, popular speaker on the circuit, but he said to me once, I feel like the people who speak in Beis Yaakov high schools in Eretz Yisrael teach. And I'm only speaking about Beis Yaakov high schools in Eretz Yisrael, not in America, because I'm not familiar with it. He says, I think they're basically dementors from Harry Potter. And they want to suck all the happiness out of the girls. An exaggeration? Yes. Yes. But why doesn't a person wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm excited. So I have to decide now. Step one. Sof ma'aseh ma'ashav techila. Why am I going to seminary? Am I going to seminary because everybody goes to seminary? Because that's basically why everybody does everything. I've told the story in the past. I was talking to a group of guys about marriage. And I started with a trick question like I always do. Why do you get married? And it took a while. I slugged up all of their answers. I showed how they were all not true. And the final answer was because everybody gets married. You get married because everybody gets married. And people go to seminary because everyone goes to seminary. But why am I going to seminary? What's my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? Where do I want to see myself at the end of the year? And make no mistake about it, there are many seminaries that make it clear. We don't want any of these people who are going to try to make the girls change. That's not what this is about. They come from nice families. We're going to teach them a lot of information. And then they're going to go home. I don't want anybody getting into the girls' kishkis and understanding them and working with them. That's not what we're about. I knew a rabbi who was in a very choshev rabbi who was in a very choshev seminary. At the end of the year, they asked him to leave because he was, had the girls over their house, was talking to them about issues and things like that. That's not what we're here for. You teach your class and you leave. Remember Weinbach Zatzal? He told me, he says, when he taught in Hadar, he says, he looked at the ceiling the whole time. He couldn't identify one girl, didn't know their names, didn't know anything about them. He came in, he taught his class, and he left. And he said to me, he says, well, I should look at the girls? So I understand now that you can only have women obviously running and teaching in all of the seminaries, right? And do people say, oh, I really want to study from Rebbetzin so-and-so, Rebbetzin this, Rebbetzin that, Or why am I going to seminary? Is it to pick up a lot of information? I'm just warming up. I have a lot to say on this subject. I don't know if this is coming across. I have a lot to say. This is an important issue to me. My brother at his 25th wedding anniversary says an Eishes Chayil, that Eishes Chayil is more precious than pearls. He says, how do you make a pearl? He says a piece of sand gets inside of the oyster, and it irritates the oyster, and the oyster releases this substance to be able to cover up the grain of sand. That's how you get a pearl. So I got up to speak afterwards, and I said, basically, his wife has been irritating him for 25 years until he buys her pearls. But this is a topic that I have a lot to speak about, and we're going to in the weeks ahead. And so that's it for this week, not for this topic, but for this week. And if you want to find out more about the podcast, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com. You could add comments. You could find out about my upcoming events. You could contact me directly. And if you want to sponsor an episode, it's RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast. Click on the sponsor an episode button. And that's it for this week. I'm David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.